Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, I'm down here on the East Coast. I'm just outside Port Elizabeth on a farmstead looking out over the Indian Ocean. Isn't it beautiful down there in this farmlands? I'm preaching at a conference here and the church has put me up in this idyllic setting, which is perfect for looking at the final chapter of Amos, because this chapter, in comparison to the rest of the book of Amos, is full of hope. Look what it says in verse 11. In that day, now this is speaking about the day of Jesus, I will restore David's fallen shelter, or in some versions, his fallen tabernacle, where David worshipped God, where David governed from. I will repair its broken walls and restore its ruins. Now, he's not talking about the rebuilding of a temple here, because we know this. Luke, when he wrote Acts, quoted this very verse. This is what it says here. The words of the prophets are in agreement with this. It is written, after this, I'll return and rebuild David's fallen tent. Its ruins will be rebuilt and will be restored, that the rest of mankind may seek the Lord, even all the Gentiles who bear his name, says the Lord. And so what is Luke telling us Amos was getting at? Well, Amos was getting at this point. He was looking at Jesus, saying there is a time coming where someone from the lineage of David, which is Jesus, is going to rebuild a place of worship where Gentiles, you and me, can come in. So in other words, Jesus of the lineage of David was going to come and make it possible again for worship to take place, for God to live among his people. This is what it says in verse 13. The days are coming, declares the Lord, where the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman and the planter by the treader of grapes. New wine will drip from the mountains and flow from the hills, and I will bring my people Israel back from exile. Now, this is picture language. It is also using the picture of Israel to describe God's people, but it describes plenty. It describes God's presence with his people. It describes restoration. That's what it's describing. And, as this book comes to an end, it ends with God's mercy. It ends with God's rebuilding. There has been judgment on sin and a new life created through Jesus Christ. Amos saw that. He saw that coming. Now, the second book we're going to deal with today is Obadiah. This is the fourth of the minor prophets, the shortest book in the whole Old Testament, slightly more than 20 verses. And we actually have no idea when this book was written, so we've got to take our clues from what's written in the text. Now, Edom and Israel were neighbors, and Edom takes its origin from Esau, the brother of Jacob. Now remember, they tussled with each other, they fought with each other, and actually their descendants carried on that combat, carried on those battles. And if you want a backstory to what was going on here, is that when the Babylonians came in to take on Jacob, which is Israel, the Edomites, who were across the Dead Sea, saw Israel vulnerable, and they swooped in behind the Babylonians and took out other Israelite cities and villages. And so God is basically saying through the prophet Obadiah that in the first part of this book, God's going to judge the pride of these Edomites. The Edomites always saw themselves as superior. Esau saw himself as superior as Jacob, and Jacob actually stole his birthright. And that came down through the generations. And so if we had to place it, in terms of where is it in Bible history, we would say it's probably about the 5th century BC, but based on the Babylonian raids, and then the Edomites coming in behind there. And it's basically split into two sections. The first section is God's judgment on Edom and their pride. And the second is every other nation that's behaving like Edom. And so it says here in verse 4, though you soar like an eagle and make your nests among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. You can't strut around like a peacock like that. And because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. And it concludes with a sober warning to any other nation that postures itself in arrogance and pride. And it's a short little book, but it certainly gets God's heart across that he will give grace to the humble and oppose the proud.